Welcome back to another episode of Insects for Fun, where we talk about all things six-legged. I'm your host, Mitchell Logan, and today we'll be talking about a popular summertime flyer. The firefly, also commonly referred to as a lightning bug, is actually not a true bug at all in the world of entomology. These insects go through complete metamorphosis, which means they do in fact have a larval stage. Now you might be wondering if the larvae of these really cool insects also glow, and the answer is yes. Larvae of fireflies are sometimes referred to as glowworms because of their ability to produce light. In fact, all firefly larvae can do this, which is really interesting because not all the adults can. In some species, even the eggs have the ability to glow faintly if disturbed. There are about 2,000 species of fireflies worldwide, with 150 or so residing in North America. There may be a lot of different species, but most all seem to enjoy standing water, which is why you can find them more easily near ponds, streams, lakes, and other bodies of fresh water. In midsummer, you can find them flying around searching for a mate, using their abdomens as a signal lamp. This kind of lighting is called bioluminescence and is found in many different animals around the world. Fireflies create this light by combining a chemical known as luciferin and luciferase enzymes with oxygen, in special organs of course. Most species of fireflies send Morse code messages through the flashing of their lights, and each species has a unique code for finding a mate. This is how they can tell each other apart at night, because there are certain times when more than one species will be active. However, not all species of fireflies are nocturnal. In fact, some are active during the day, and these of course don't use any light at all. What's the point if they won't be seen? Back in my home state of Vermont, I would commonly find one species referred to as a winter firefly during the day in my backyard. These ones are slightly less colorful than the nocturnal species, but have a unique ability to withstand sub-freezing temperatures as adults. During the fall, these winter fireflies will burrow into grooves of trees and enter a state of sleep called diapause. This lasts until springtime, when the weather gets warm enough for them to once again get active. The nocturnal or nighttime variety hibernate as a larva by burrowing into the ground or deeper in a tree. It takes some species 2 whole winters before they're ready to molt into an adult. That's a long time to be crawling around searching for food. Now, fortunately, I was able to get in touch with someone who actually does research on fireflies, and she is specifically working with the winter fireflies right now, known as Phlocalyst coruscus. In fact, she just discovered the first ever known pheromone used with fireflies, and I'm going to play you the audio from our conversation now.
All right, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Sarah Lauer. I have been studying fireflies since 2010. So racking
nice.
up the years.
Yeah, you got yeah, absolutely. Nice.
I grew up on the West Coast where we don't have flashing fireflies, and so you could imagine coming over to the East Coast and getting to grad school, and I was down at the University of Georgia, and fireflies all over the place. So it was quite a firefly wonderland.
Yeah, I love them. They're so nice to look at, especially I don't know, for me, they're just a symbol that warmer weather is finally here. And then it's also just really sweet to see them flying around, right? It's like you're getting, it's what is it? It's kind of like you're seeing stars, right? You have lots of green stars kind of flying around. It gives it kind of like a nice space atmosphere, but it's also just really calming, I feel like, to see that kind of stuff.
When I'm out with my students in the field, we have this fun game that we play called, is it a star? Is it a firefly? Is it a satellite? Is it a firefly? Is it a plane?
Yeah,
is it a firefly? Because of all the blinking lights that are out and about these days.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I'm very fortunate right now, at least I am in a very kind of boons part of Japan. So there's really not a lot of light pollution at all over here. Some of my buddies, they're like, "Well, is this what stars look like?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, you've never seen stars before?" "No, I grew up in Houston." "Oh God."
So I growing up out in California, I had never seen the Milky Way until I moved out to the East Coast, and we moved to Ithaca for my postdoc. I was a postdoc at Cornell, and we were living out in the boonies around Ithaca, and it was gorgeous.
I've been over there. Awesome. So you have fireflies on the West Coast, but you said they weren't blinking fireflies. Would those be the winter fireflies?
So there are several different. So winter fireflies actually describes Phytinus coruscus, which is a species complex, we think, of unlighted fireflies that lives sort of like Mexico up to Canada, but doesn't like that. That range is about as far as it gets. It's pretty wide ranging for a North American firefly. There are other species of that genus out on the West Coast that also are day active, and they don't light up as adults. So similar, but not necessarily the Phytinus coruscus.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I've always, growing up in Vermont, that's where I was actually raised. I would see a lot of the winter fireflies during the summertime. We have a lot of them up there, and I would always see them around late spring to early summer. And when I was younger, I was like, okay, this looks like a firefly, but it doesn't light up, and the abdomen doesn't have like that yellowy green color. So I was always kind of confused. Like, is it not a firefly? Is it a firefly? Like, what's happening here?
So one of the key traits of fireflies is that even if they don't light up as an adult, all fireflies light up in the larval stage. So as a larva, that firefly that you found was glowing from two paired what we call lanterns on the abdomen.
Okay.
Or, on the tail end segments of this larva. But as an adult, no lantern. They've done some really cool studies where they have sort of lasered off the lanterns of larvae and then allowed the larva to undergo pupation. And the adult pops out just fine. Like, big lantern, no worries.
Oh yeah, all right.
So they're not necessarily the same structure in larva and adult.
Right, and I've also seen as well that the eggs, right, the eggs of fireflies can also light up. And is that true for all species, or is that only a subset of species that have eggs that can light up? I tried doing a lot of research myself, and it was pretty difficult thing to figure out.
This is another point that I come to with my student quite frequently when I go, I'm not sure. We've looked in, a handful of species, we being the scientific community.
Yeah.
But we haven't looked in all of them. And frankly, I don't know the answer, but I don't think anybody knows the answer to that.
I don't think anybody knows the answer to it either, but I think it's interesting that we do know the answer that all larvae can light up, but the eggs we just don't know. And I wasn't sure if maybe you had any insight into that I don't, but yeah, I mean.
So all of the papers that I know of that have looked at egg luminescence suggest that they are luminescent when they are laid. But again,
right. How can we prove that?
For all species.
There's so many species. Yeah, exactly. There's so many species. So going back to the whole fireflies being able to light up, this I mentioned earlier is about mating, right? So they use these Morse codes to kind of attract other fireflies, but winter fireflies, they don't do this, right? They don't light up at all, and they don't have that special Morse code way of communicating to other mates. So, and this is something that you've been focusing on recently. You have a paper coming out very, very soon. Would you care to enlighten us about what's going on here with the winter fireflies?
Sure. Yeah, so as you were talking about these firefly species that we're most familiar with, the ones that come out at night and are blinking, they're using light as a mating signal most of the time. The flashes that we generally see are males that are emitting a species-specific flash pattern. And females are kind of down in the vegetation. And when they see a flash pattern that they like, they'll actually reply to the male with a flash of their own. And so then the male will see that and then, keep flashing at that female, and they'll sort of go back and forth and back and forth until they find each other. Winter fireflies and other day active species that have lost the ability to produce light don't have that mechanism, right? Light is not useful in the daytime, right? As a signal.
Yeah, absolutely not.
There's no contrast there. So we think for a very long time, it's been thought that they use some sort of volatile pheromone, so a gas that would be floating in the air, and this compound would serve as the mating signal. So in this case, we think that maybe a female sitting on a leaf would emit this pheromone, this perfume, if you will, and it would sort of be carried by the wind, and males would sense this pheromone with their antenna and sort of follow this plume of perfume back to where the female is, and that's how they find each other and mate. And there's been pretty good evidence from multiple species that there is a pheromone. So you can take a female, put her in a petri dish, put her out in the middle of a field, and then wait and see what happens. And sure enough, 10, 20, 30 minutes later, you get all these males sort of congregating around this dish. So she has to be emitting some sort of signal.
Right, exactly.
But nobody had ever measured a volatile pheromone from a firefly before. And so just this past week or two, we were able to get this paper out where it's a very collaborative project between researchers at the University of California, Riverside, and Middlebury College and Bucknell. And we worked together to identify the first volatile mating pheromone of any firefly.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's super awesome. And so trying to, I don't know, like a pheromone to me has always been something that's intangible. Like how can you actually collect that? How can you, because we can't see it, right? We can't smell it. It's an invisible thing to us that only insects can pick up, right? With the special organs. So how did you do it? Like how did this happen?
So how we did it? Well, you're exactly right. This smell is not something that we can smell. I can take a vial of this chemical and give it a whiff, and I don't smell anything. So we used very specialized equipment. We used gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, to measure the different compounds that are coming off of male and female winter firefly. And then we also, our collaborators at University of California, Riverside, in the Miller Lab, were able to actually do simultaneous measurement of the different compounds that are emitted by a firefly, and then also hook that up to an antenna that they had removed from a firefly that has been hooked up to electrodes. And so when you flow different chemical compounds over this antenna that's hooked up to electrodes, you get a nerve response to the compounds that the antenna is sensing. And so we're flowing the different chemicals that we had identified by the GCMS over that, and it responded, the male antenna responded to this single compound that only females were emitting.
And then, so for the males, were the males emitting anything in particular, or was it mostly just trying to use males to figure out what was the green light signal? What was the...
So we measured both males and females, and we found that only females were emitting this particular compound. Both sexes are emitting all sorts of different chemicals. Insects are real good at chemical communication. And so...
See, I have zero background in the chemical communication between insects. I focused on a lot of ecological and conservation type things, specifically with like parasitoids. And I've done a lot of rearing with like Coleoptera beetles, and I have lots of Saturniids. I love Saturniids. I actually have eggs to the Japanese oak silk moth in my fridge right now. Yeah, they're different. Usually Saturniids, they go through this stage of diapause as pupa. So they kind of weave these silken cocoons and whatnot. But this one goes through diapause as an egg. And it's interesting because the moths, they mate and do everything in fall. And then that's it. So fall is their time to shine versus a lot of the other ones, like summer is their flight time. So yeah, this one's kind of weird.
Yeah, in fireflies, we think of sort of overwintering and also getting through the heat of the summer is within the larval stage of the firefly, except for winter fireflies. Winter fireflies are the inverse of what you expect.
Yes, they're the complete opposite, which is really, really cool.
So instead of like your summer firefly that sort of comes out in the summer, mates, lays eggs, those eggs hatch out by the end of the summer, and then they spend 1 to 2 years as a larvae, sort of living on and underneath the soil, and they overwinter and get through the heat of the summer as a larva, and then back to emerge as adults in the summertime. These winter fireflies, they emerge as adults like around here in Pennsylvania, about end of August, early September. And then they'll overwinter on the sides of trees as adults, go through diapause. And then in the spring, mature their testes and their ovaries, mate, lay eggs. And then, so they're spending, so the summer species spend maybe like 2 to 4 weeks as an adult, whereas these winter species, it can be up to like 10 months as in the adult stage.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I remember I would see them like just hanging out in the bark, right, on the sides of trees and crevices, that kind of thing. Which, it's just super cool to think about the insects that have this ability to just kind of withstand these really frigid temperatures, right? And they don't die. They kind of they have these compounds that kind of help elasticize their inner organs to make sure that the freezing just doesn't make them explode, kind of, which is super crazy to think about.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we don't know anything about firefly diapause, and that would be awesome to look at.
That would be something really interesting. Yeah, because they must have some kind of antifreeze, like glycerol, I'm assuming, something like that. There must be something going on in there. Because I know that tends to be the case for most insects that can survive like freezing temperatures, like woolly bear caterpillars, for example, all of that kind of stuff. They're all able to kind of produce this chemical compound that just keeps them from exploding. So I feel like there's got to be something, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be something going on.
Our co-author on the study, Greg Pask, who's at Middlebury College, has a population. He went out this past fall and found a tree stump, and he looked under the tree stump, and there were a bunch of adult winter fireflies sort of stuck to the bottom, huddled. And they were still there. He went back and checked a couple weeks ago. They're still there. It was -3 or whatever. You know, it was Vermont, so it gets real cold. Yeah, they were just chilling, literally.
It's wild. Oh, it's so cool that they do that, though. So what about fireflies had you kind of gravitate towards researching them? Like why fireflies?
Why fireflies? That's a really good question. So when I was first starting out in grad school, I went to UGA for my PhD, University of Georgia, and I was in the genetics department with a much more sort of evolution focus than a molecular biology focus. That particular program that I came in through does rotations. So, right, you do 6 weeks in 3 different labs, and I could actually go do rotations in different departments and then pick which lab I wanted to go into. And I rotated in a Drosophila research lab, a monarch butterfly research lab, And I also did this particular rotation where I did a literature review on fireflies. And I was just struck by the fact that, we think we know them. We go out, they're pretty, they're cute. And then you start reading about them and you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much more behind those signals than I thought there was. And then you start asking questions. Well, why did they do this? And what's the history of this? And how did this behavior arise? And we just don't know a lot of that. And so I just got really fascinated by all of the variations they have and how that behavior has come to be. My research right now focuses on two main questions. One is looking at how did chemical signaling evolve in fireflies, chemical versus light signaling.
Yeah.
We've also done some work on the evolution of predation. So talking about those fireflies that mimic the signals of other species to lure males in and eat them.
The femme fatales, yes.
And then the last research area in my lab right now is trying to look at fireflies. We've had a really hard time rearing fireflies in the lab. We can get them to mate.
Interesting.
We can get them to lay eggs. We can get those eggs to hatch. Yeah. And then it is like a slow, agonizing decline of the larvae, at least of terrestrial species. Aquatic species, especially species from Asia, where the field is having much more success with rearing. But here in North America, our North American terrestrial species are having a really hard time. And they seem to succumb to all these different types of infections, fungal infections, bacterial infections, nematodes, whatever. And so the other part of the research in my lab collaborates with a Drosophila immune system specialist. And we're asking questions about how do fireflies combat infection? How do they, do they have a good immune system relative to what we know about another species?
Yeah. Because, I mean, with insects, it's very interesting. I mean, the internal organs, it's just a bunch of nerve bundles, right? Ganglions that just kind of comprise the inside of an insect. But they do have an immune system and they can heal. And I've seen it before, actually, rearing caterpillars. Some of them will get injured and you think, oh man, are they just going to be leaking fluids forever? But no, the wound heals up. They got everything they need to keep themselves. But combating viruses, that's something I'm not sure. I don't know if I've ever seen an insect survive a viral infection. Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, we're trying different things to try to keep our colonies like clean and free of infection, but we haven't had much luck so far.
And so that's the one thing that's been getting these terrestrial fireflies in the lab then is infections, that kind of thing, or is there something else that's causing the slow decline of
it could be that they are missing a key part of their diet. For many species, we don't know what they eat. Like, this is a fundamental thing that we don't know about fireflies.
That's very true. I saw that a lot too when I was doing a lot of reading up on fireflies, and one common thing seems to be that we just it's like, what do they actually eat? I mean, I know when I would catch fireflies as a kid, I would sometimes house them, and I would end up feeding them like apples, pieces of fruit and stuff like that, and they would do that. They would also cannibalize each other.
Yep. Made that mistake also.
Have to watch. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to figure out like what makes them go. And so with the terrestrial fireflies, I know fireflies in general have a strong affinity to water. With these terrestrial fireflies, do you have any insight into why do they love these moist environments? Why is it that we're always seeing them by rivers, streams, these sources of like really clean fresh water?
So when we bring fireflies out of nature. You as a kid with your mason jar, or whoever with their mason jar, or us as scientists bringing them from outside in, what we find is that they dry out really fast.
Okay.
We have to house them with extra moisture in a high humidity incubator, or else they just shrivel.
Wow.
And so,
okay.
One hypothesis that I have is that it's related to that, that they are sort of selecting habitats with these high humidity because they need that.
Yeah. I had no idea that they would dry out that fast. I mean, that's the other thing too, is that now that I'm thinking about it, every time I've seen winter fireflies, I haven't necessarily seen them actually near water sources the same way that I've seen these other ones. And I don't know if that was just coincidental, or is there a reason for that?
I'm trying to think about our populations here.
Yeah, is there something you've noticed?
Ours are all kind of near water. There's a lot of water in Pennsylvania.
No, it's got to just be that the area that I was in had a relatively high humidity, or the soil had a good amount of moisture content. I don't know. It's like, I'm just thinking like these winter fireflies are diurnal and they don't have lights. Maybe they also don't need water. I don't know.
They're interesting beasts, right? They're totally the opposite of what you expect for a firefly in terms of, 10 months as an adult. Maybe they have some adaptations that help keep them from drying out in this winter air, right? That would make sense. We found that they do have quite a lot of, in the compounds that we're measuring from the surfaces of these fireflies, they do have, like insects do, cuticular hydrocarbons, or CHCs, and these are substances that they're smelly, but they also are waxy, and they serve as a way to sort of keep the insect from drying out, and then have been co-opted in many insect groups as a form of species recognition. So like when you see certain insects like tapping with antenna, tapping body parts, sometimes that is sensing the CHCs and looking at aspects of species recognition, that kind of thing.
Right. Wow. Okay. Is there anything that you want to talk about before we wrap up regarding like future work, or where they can find your work, stuff like that? Is there anything you want to plug, or anything you want to talk about?
So one thing that I will plug is I'm part of the Fireflies International Network, or FIN. And this is an organization not just of scientists, but of naturalists, of educators, of artists, writers, folks who generally have an interest in fireflies. So anybody can join, right?
Cool, yeah.
And we're trying to get together this network of people to bring more attention and learning and sharing of resources about fireflies. One of the things that we've really been concentrating on since the organization was founded is firefly conservation. And so you can head to the website, check out resources for firefly conservation. How can you best serve fireflies? One of the things that we really like, that we think is important to talk about, at least for the nocturnal species, is light pollution, right? So
yes,
light pollution is a growing problem, not just for fireflies, but for many night active organisms, and for humans, right? We screw up our day-night cycles with some of this extra light.
Our melatonin windows are getting all messed up.
And so with fireflies, it's particularly an issue for species that come out really late at night, that need darkness for signaling. And so there are several campaigns out and about to say, hey, you know what, in the summertime, during firefly season, turn off your external light if you can.
Yes.
When you're out looking for fireflies, really nice. Keep your lights off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, and why would you even want to have your lights on if you have fireflies around? Like that's all the light you need, right?
If you have a bright moon, you can see everything.
Honestly, it's very true. Yeah, the amount of stuff you can see with a bright moon, and like you said, light pollution is a growing problem for a lot of nocturnal insects. So
yeah, and there are sort of not as drastic solutions, right? Say you need light for safety, right? People usually associate those two things. There might be options like directing light downward instead of broadcasting it out that would sort of keep the light pollution more contained. So
absolutely.
So head to Finn website and check it out. There's also some information from the Xerces Society, most known for their work with butterflies, but they've really helped us out help the firefly community out with developing these resources on firefly conservation.
All right, I am all for conservation. As mentioned before, that's kind of where my specialty is, along with ecology related stuff, which is why all of the molecular, as soon as once it gets to a certain size, I'm just like, what? I don't know what's happening. I can't see it. What is that? Like, it's out of my wheelhouse.
So the cool thing about the smell stuff though is that you can see the effect, right? So we were out in the woods, holding this, we put the pheromone in a little rubber cup, and then we put that little rubber cup inside a tea ball, like you would use to make tea.
Yeah.
And so you can go out in the woods and like dangle this thing out there, and then fireflies flock all around. You're like the Disney princess.
Oh yeah.
Except you're not singing. You're just perfuming, and all the fireflies are coming to you. It's pretty amazing.
I've had a similar thing happen to me, specifically with polyphemus moths. When I was raising those in Vermont, I had a female, and she was releasing her pheromone, and the pheromone was getting everywhere, right? So it was all over my clothes. It was, all over me. And so I would have these giant male moths come flying in from all directions, and they would be flying onto me, and they would be trying to they'd be trying to figure out where the female is, but they're just crawling up and down me. And I'm just, all right, clearly I got too close to the female for a certain amount of time, and I have to get out of here. But the nice thing about Saturniids, at least, is if you got a male, you can literally just hold his wings, and you can just pair them. It's really that easy. They're super blind, so they kind of need help anyway.
So smell is really important.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I was doing some entomology field work in Massachusetts, one of the, I think it was PhD candidate, she was talking about how she was working with a moth. Now, I don't remember specifically what the moth was, but she had essentially been working with pheromones. And what happened was she had spent too much time around this one specific pheromone, to the point where when she was finished doing her work, she was just constantly getting swarmed by the male moths. And she was just an absolute magnet for these. And it's just because that's how potent this thing is, that we can't see, we can't smell, but it's really that potent.
Yeah. We try to be really careful with how we're handling the pheromone and making sure we don't get it on anything. There's one last thing that I would love your audience to know, which is we need their help. So we don't know a lot about firefly ranges, right? We don't know where they all occur. We don't know that much about, we'd like to know more about their seasonal emergence and when that happens and how can we predict that. And so I would love folks, if they're interested in helping us out, to go onto the Mass Audubon website and check out Firefly Watch. So sort of like the Christmas bird count, but for fireflies. And during the summer, we have Firefly Watch, and we ask folks to participate, to their degree of interest, just going out and looking at presence and absence of fireflies in their yard. You could do it once a season. You could do it every night. There's some instructions there if you want to help out a little bit more and do counts of abundance to help give us more data. There's more information there if you even want to get to like looking at the flash pattern and telling which species. So you can participate to your desired
at any level of
and then that data goes into a huge database that we can then use to try to figure out, all right, what are the habitat predictors of fireflies? What sort of habitat requirements do they need? When did they emerge? Is it changing due to climate change? Is it affected by proximity to urban areas? Like, we can ask all these different questions with this data set, definitely. But we can't do it just by ourselves. We need help. So.
No, I'm sure people would definitely be willing to do that. I mean, the nice thing is you can participate at any level of firefly fandom.
Yes.
You can get the hardcore, you can get the hardcore people, you can get the people that are like, oh, I saw a firefly and I'm located in blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Man, that's great. Awesome.
So Firefly Watch. Check it out.
All right, now we're back. As mentioned in the conversation, many species of fireflies don't have a documented food source, and some don't eat anything at all. But there's one firefly which we barely touched on that I would like to share with you now. These ones are known as femme fatales. This literally translates to disastrous woman, and these characters are often portrayed in media as attractive or seductive women who take advantage of men once they get them into a compromising position. And this is exactly what happens with the fireflies in the genus Photyrus. The fireflies have evolved to catfish unsuspecting males in the genus Photynus by mimicking a variety of light Morse codes. This of course means that the diurnal winter fireflies are safe. Anyway, once a male is in a compromising position, the female strikes and eats him alive. She not only gets nutrients from this, but also takes in toxins known as lucibufagins, and these are stored and used for her own young as self-defense. In general, the larvae of fireflies are also carnivorous, and the larvae can be found foraging for worms, slugs, snails, and other soft-bodied insects on leaves, the ground, or even in some cases, the water. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast or sharing it with friends to help spread the love of bugs. Next week, I'll get into some cricket territory. And of course, if you have any recommendations, please send me an email at insectsfordummies@gmail.com. I'll see you next week.